Hello, everybody. It's Saturday, December the 6th, 2025. Back in August this year, did a show. It was one of my favorite shows, actually, of the year with the great environmentalist Bill McKibben. He's often associated with bad news, particularly on the climate change front. But his new book, Here Comes the Sun, was actually rather cheerful. He seems to believe that there is an opportunity to save the world. We called the show Move Fast and Fix the World. Here Comes the Sun. I hope he's right. So I was particularly intrigued. My guest today has a new book out, Samuel Miller McDonald. It's called Progress, How One Idea Built Civilization and Now Threatens to Destroy It. It's a book that I think is much less optimistic than the McKibben book, and yet it comes with a blurb from Bill McKibben. He says, "This is a wise book. We need somehow to take the human traits that fixated on more and turn them towards better." As I said, the book is called Progress, How One Idea Built Civilization and Now Threatens to Destroy It. It's by Samuel Miller McDonald, who is joining us from Sheffield in England. Congratulations, Samuel, on the new book. Have you had a chance to look at McKibben's new book, Here Comes the Sun? I'm curious as to whether you're troubled perhaps by his optimism.
I haven't read it yet. I've been a longtime fan of Bill McKibben's, and it's definitely on the list. No, I mean, I think, my book ends more optimistically than it runs for most of it. And I don't know if I'd say it's optimistic, but I think it tries to find things that we can, hold on to for, possible paths to a better future than we have now. It's not just critiquing the idea of progress. It's also trying to put forward a kind of alternative to what we associate with progress a lot today. I think with, optimism around solar energy, I do see a lot of messaging today around solar as this kind of inevitable energy transition because prices come down so much, because manufacturing has gone up so much. I think, unfortunately, in most cases, it hasn't actually displaced most carbon energy sources. It's supplemented, it's increased demand along with supply. And so I don't think there's a really kind of inevitable transition that we can expect with solar, even if all of the kind of policy and economic incentives go in the right direction.
Yeah, I wonder whether McKibben is the canary in the coal mine in terms of maybe a slight shift in the zeitgeist, people becoming slightly more optimistic than they have been. The book's subtitle is How One Idea Built Civilization and Now Threatens to Destroy It. The C word is interesting, civilization. What exactly is civilization, Samuel, at least in terms of your narrative? Is it classical civilization? Is it the remains of Athens or of Rome? Is it roads? Is it food? I'm not quite sure what that word means.
Sure, yeah, and I think you're certainly right to be wanting to interrogate that word, and the book does do that as well. I'm defining it basically as something that I think is a frequent definition, which is the emergence of a kind of political economy. It emerges around 5,000 years ago in the early dynastic period in Mesopotamia. These are essentially market empires. So, market relations emerge in these political economies where you have really, regimented labor, you have investments, financial instruments, and you have this kind of orientation to surpluses and, getting profit from these market transactions. And then you have imperial relations that come out from the kind of expansionism that's embedded in these societies and kind of encoded in the political economy. And, you have examples of these early states budding off into colonies where extraction occurs, brings it back into the kind of metabolism of the economy. And that's really something you see emerging for the first time, as far as we know, as far as the archaeological evidence goes.
Do you have a narrative in this? I mean, the great theorists of quote unquote civilization always have narratives of one kind. The world's either getting better or worse. Rousseau and Marx come to mind. The review in The Guardian, which was pretty positive, suggested that the one criticism suggested that you fell into the David Graeber, David Wengrow trap of suggesting that the Enlightenment ideals came from indigenous America. Is that a fair, if not a fair critique, is that a fair analysis of your narrative?
I don't think so. That particular bit was maybe a page, and it was certainly not a point on which the argument hinged or the narrative hinged. And in fact, I think the book is more a critique of the Enlightenment than it is a kind of attempt to, give another culture credit for it. It does have a narrative. I wouldn't say it's either, a declinist narrative saying everything is, falling and getting worse.
The Rousseauan narrative, which everything began well and everything's been a fall since, or the Marxian analysis, which sees progress particularly achieved through technology. So it's neither of those.
Correct. Yeah, it's neither of those. I think the kind of thrust of the narrative is that there has been this considerable break from particular ecological relations between human and ecological systems. That break occurred with the rise of this kind of new civilization, these market empires, and that break has been at the heart of a lot of the problems that we've seen through this 5,000-year history, whether that's kind of the genocides that come out of conquest, or the mass extinctions and ecocide that comes out of these kinds of economies.
Is your book an intellectual history? I mean, there was a very famous book written, I'm sure you're familiar with it, by J.B. Berry, one of the classics of English intellectual history, called The Idea of Progress, an inquiry into its origin and growth, which focused very much on the Enlightenment, the 18th and 19th century, and the idea of progress as the foundation of civilization. The title of your book, Samuel, as you know, is Progress: How One Idea Built Civilization and Now Threatens to Destroy It. Is it an intellectual history of an idea or a thing? I mean, progress is a concept. It's not concrete. What are you actually doing in this book? Are you critiquing the idea of progress?
Certainly, yeah. It is an idea in the book, but I try to complicate it a bit by saying that it's really a narrative formula. It's a structure in which certain rhetorics take, a framework that certain rhetorics take on. So I identify these different cultures where progress narratives have been important to the kind of reproduction of these kinds of political economies. There is an intellectual history that's an element running through it. I try to connect, the early sources of this narrative formula in the Enuma Elish and the Epic of Gilgamesh.
But to come back to the Berry book, which I'm sure you're familiar with, it's not a standard sort of a classic, shall we say, an Enlightenment history of the idea of progress. That's not what you're trying to do. Is that fair?
No, that's fair. Yeah, the Enlightenment is a part of this history that I'm putting forward, but this is kind of examining how these narratives and this idea emerge much earlier than that. I'm drawing a bit from the history of the idea of progress, which was a older book that I think puts forward a good kind of analysis of the history of the idea.
Well, let me ask you again. It's a huge subject, Samuel. You know this better than I do. What was good first about the idea? You said one idea built civilization, which I assume is a good thing. We want civilization. I don't know what the reverse of civilization is. I guess it's barbarism. So why did it work in the first place? Why was progress once good and now it isn't?
Well, the narrative I'm putting forward is that civilization, this kind of society that we call civilization, is a concrete thing. It's a physical process. It's something that has very materialistic kind of presence in the world and impact on history. And progress has been, or these progressive narratives have been, a kind of mutual, self-reproducing and self-reinforcing kind of ideological system that has accompanied this material process.
That sounds very, very vague, Samuel. You need to be more concrete with me.
Sure. Okay. So the process that I'm laying out is these kind of early market empires. They have a relation to the ecological systems they inhabit that is what I'm calling parasitic. In ecological relations, a parasitic relationship is one in which an organism extracts from another and does harm to that organism.
So it was exploitative. You're exploiting. So these early civilizations were exploiting nature. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. And that's, so the Epic of Gilgamesh is a kind of hagiography of potentially a real person, real leader, and a society that, deforested this region and did so in order to build cities, essentially, and bring the lumber into.
But are you saying that's a good? I mean, implicitly in the title is that it's a myth that made us. So in other words, it was a good thing in the first place. So are you suggesting in the first place the exploitation of nature wasn't a bad thing? It's just the nature of things. We exploit nature and we build civilization, we build temples and churches and markets, and that's just the nature of human history.
Well, no, I am saying it's a bad thing. I'm saying from the beginning, it's a break.
So it's always been bad. So progress has never been a good thing in your mind.
I think this particular narrative formula that I'm identifying has generally been had a net negative. That doesn't mean there haven't been good things. I think there have been good things that have happened within these kinds of societies, and that's something that I bring up in the book as well. But on the whole, yeah, I think it's led to a situation where, today we have these catastrophic problems in the climate change and ecological collapse that really threaten to make everything null. I mean, nothing matters. We can't do anything. Society won't exist if we don't have a habitable planet. And I'm tying this kind of crisis that we have today directly to this historical lineage of kind of, economic growthism, environmental destruction, expansionism, and so forth.
Yeah, so you don't sound a great fan of progress. Would it be fair to say, Samuel, that you're arguing that in the first place, in ancient pre-industrial civilization, agricultural civilization, progress was by definition exploitative of nature, but for better or worse, there weren't the technological resources to destroy nature. So at one point in a pre-industrial world, progress was, if not ideal, was kind of acceptable or okay. And then we have the Industrial Revolution. And therefore, progress got hitched to developments which essentially, progress didn't change. It remained exploitative, but because the technologies were so much more powerful now, it destroys civilization. Is that the argument in the book?
Essentially, yes. And I wouldn't say, I think pre-industrial, you have a lot of examples of really awful things happening. There's an extended part in the book about the genocide in the Americas and how it was justified and kind of understood through progressive lenses. So I don't want to say that, prior to industrialization, there wasn't a real problem here. But yes, certainly once you introduce fossil energy into this process, then you have, a series of issues arise from that, speeding up production, speeding up distribution, and then, of course, emitting, carbon dioxide, greenhouse gases. And these all compound and coalesce into this crisis we have now that's global. So in the past, you might have these kind of boom
Although
and
not
bust
everyone would necessarily
civilizations.
agree that there's a crisis. I mean, your book has ruffled some people's feathers. In The Spectator, I'm sure you've read the review. I thought it was a rather entertaining review, saying that
I haven't read any of them.
That it described the book as a joke, in the sense that you seem to just dismiss all forms of progress, all forms of industrialization. Is that, I mean, it's obviously you wouldn't agree with that, but is that maybe an element of the narrative, Samuel, that you're suggesting that industrial progress has been a disaster for mankind, for humanity?
Well, I mean, I don't think anybody who knows anything about the science would deny that there's a significant crisis right now.
Well, McKibben is a bit more cheerful than you are, but the level of the crisis, there's some people who believe it's apocalyptic, others that don't. I'm just trying to figure out what you're arguing here, in terms of the nature of the world, of our quote unquote civilization. Are you suggesting that we're on the path to extinction through this idea of progress, or the misunderstanding of what quote unquote progress should or actually is?
Yeah, that's right.
So it's not, I mean, you started this conversation saying that it was positive, but that doesn't sound very cheerful. It's not sunny. I mean, McKibben wrote, "Here comes the sun." Where's the sun in your narrative?
Well, what I'm arguing is that the current path we're on doesn't have to be inevitable. So, there are a lot of paths we can take that are alternatives. Something that I really did like about the Graeber and Wengrow book, Dawn of Everything, was that they made a strong case. Forget the Enlightenment argument they made. They made a strong case that there have been many different kinds of societies that have existed through time, and particularly prehistoric societies, many different ways cultures can organize themselves. And I'm inspired by that. And I'm inspired by the idea that we can have many different kinds of societies that aren't going to, drive us off a cliff and kill everyone and everything and make the planet uninhabitable.
What model, if someone said, well, look back in history and find a society that works, that you want to emulate today, what would that be?
Well, in the beginning, I look at some of the First Nations cultures in the Americas, particularly in the Ohio River Valley. There were some very effective civilizations there, if we want to call them civilizations. They were very organized. They were agrarian and had, permanent settlements, and they were prosperous. They were egalitarian. They had, a level of technology that I think was, maximized human well-being. I think part of the argument I'm making is that all of the, technological progress is not always positive. It doesn't always have a net positive for human beings today. And in fact, I think a lot of it, maybe most of it, doesn't.
So you would, I mean, implicit perhaps in this narrative is you would like us to go back to pre-industrial indigenous North American societies. Is that the argument?
No, I wouldn't say go back to it. I would say that there's a lot we can learn about those.
Take some of their ideas. How would that actually work, though, Samuel? What would it mean? What in our, for better or worse, globalized, digitalized, post-industrial world? What would need to happen?
Well, I have, I don't know, maybe 5 chapters that go through a variety of different things that we could be doing that wouldn't, necessarily deliver that immediately, but could start getting us in that direction. And it's things like, rewilding. It's things like supporting agroecology, getting away from these kind of big monoculture industrial agricultural projects, rethinking the kind of, growthism that's intrinsic to a lot of the economy today. And, that entails a lot of change that I don't necessarily think is going to happen, but that I think it could. And I think we have to at least entertain the possibility of that.
We've done a number of shows on rewilding and also on degrowth strategies, one with Tim Jackson, for example. And it seems as though ultimately a lot of these critiques, maybe not so much in the rewilding movement, but certainly with guys like Jackson, who I rather like, and I like his work, and I've enjoyed having him on the show, is ultimately they argue that capitalism hasn't and can't work. Is that what you're also arguing in Progress? If we are to build another kind of civilization, does it need to be a post-capitalist one?
Sure, absolutely. And part of the intellectual history of the book is trying to situate capitalism in a particular kind of episode within this history, and present it as something that's not natural or intrinsic to human societies or inevitable, but is a kind of intellectual product that can be rejected and reformed and replaced.
You have an interesting X page. And one thing I wrote, one thing that I read on it is that you posted something about stuff that you actually hadn't posted, that you drafted and didn't, but you might one day. You wrote, "I'd say political violence is the only legitimate form of violence." What does that mean? And how are we supposed to change the world? Is political violence legitimate in terms of what's happening in the world today, particularly in terms of environmental destruction?
I can't remember what that was quoting. If you see it, it's, doing a quote tweet and responding to some other thing that maybe you can find and pull up, but and a little bit of a joke. But yeah, there's a part in the book that says that one thing we can learn from some of these indigenous or what I call commensalist societies. They have a particular relationship to ecologies that's commensalist. It's not harmful. Is that they police very harshly who rules those societies. And that's something that we haven't done very well.
Say that again. What does that mean?
It means they remove people who try to oppress the people in their group. So today
so that's a good or a bad thing?
That's a good thing. That's something that
we can learn. Give me an
example
example of how that works.
Sure. Yeah. So I draw from work by Ian Morse to talk about this, where essentially you have a process in a lot of these kinds of societies where there's if somebody is trying to, form a coalition that takes all of the food or is trying to, boss people around in the group tends to respond in a way that either it may start by ostracizing them, it may try to exile them, and then ultimately, if none of the other things work, they kill them. And this is also something that Robin Wall Kimmerer talks about a bit.
Well, I don't really care who else talks about it. I'm only interested in what you think. You wrote, coming back again,
also Josh Brolin and Jeff Bridges.
Yeah, but you wrote.
That was interesting too.
Yeah, but I'm interested in you, Samuel. You've written the book. The only path to salvation and redemption for civilization today is the total dissolution of the world's political and business elite classes. You actually wrote that yourself on X. Is that what you're talking about? Is that what should happen to sort of mimic what happened in the indigenous world? Is that there needs to be a violent revolt against the world's political and business elite classes? Is that how we can protect progress?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, most of them seem to be criminals, gangsters, thugs, pedophiles. These are psychopaths.
Most of them are pedophiles. I mean, we all know about Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, that's one case.
Trying to enslave people. That's what they want. They want to enslave everybody. And
Who
if
like?
somebody
Can you
tries
give
to
me some
enslave you,
examples?
Peter Thiel,
I'm not sure he's a pedophile, is he?
well, he wants to enslave everybody. That's what
Does he?
I'm saying. Yeah, absolutely. Curtis Yarvin has been very upfront about that. I think everybody kind of surrounding Trump are snatching people off the streets just extrajudicially. They're extrajudicially assassinating people. I mean, it's pretty clear to me these are criminals and psychopaths.
Well, I mean, they're examples of wealthy people, but not every wealthy person is a criminal or a psychopath, are they? And I mean, talking about the political and business elite classes, it sounds to me rather dramatic. I mean, who defines who the elite is? Do you have to earn over a certain amount of money to be part of that elite?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's one way to do
Well,
it.
what would be the number, for example? How much would you need
10
to
million.
earn to be dissolved?
Maybe 10 million. If you're hoarding that, that's probably pretty good benchmark.
And so if you hoard 10 million, what should happen to the people who have $10 million for one way or the other in their bank account?
Well, it should be taken away. Everything above that should be taken away by a strong government.
And then what would the government, I mean, who would determine who that government is and what would they do with it?
Well, at this point, there's a lot they can do with it. How we determine who it is, that's a whole conversation we can have. Whether we go with something like sortition, which I've seen put out there, which I think is not a bad idea.
What is that?
It's like how jury service. It's a you select people from a given population. It's an ancient Greek idea, and I think it has some merit. But what to do with it? There's so much.
Let's go back
there's so many solar panels to build. That's going to take a lot of money.
Well, some people might suggest that that's what's happening perhaps in China compared to the United States. The Chinese have. Well, what's your take on the Chinese model of progress? We've done a number of shows on that recently, where they've made, for better or worse, massive investments in solar energy and in renewables. Is China as a model, does it conform more to the idea of progress and civilization than the United States?
Not necessarily. I have a chapter that is, critiquing Mao and Maoism and the direction that China has gone in recently. They're very growthist, so I critique them as well. I think China is building out.
What does the word growthist mean?
Fixated on economic growth above everything else. They're also the biggest consumer of coal. So, they're also emitting greenhouse gases more than anybody. And so, no, I certainly don't think they're a good model for progress.
Your book is a history book, as you've noted. You have a chapter on Mao. But isn't that a warning, Samuel, for people who believe that, as you do, that the only path to salvation and redemption for civilization today is the total dissolution of the world's political and business elite classes, that things don't always quite work to plan when it comes to those ideas? You only have to look at the Chinese or the Russian Revolution, Khmer Rouge, or even the French Revolution. That history is a bloody, complicated affair.
Yeah, certainly. And I point to the problem with those examples being that they retained this kind of, militarized, hierarchical, and extractive set of relations.
So are there, again, coming back to models, are there examples of movements that you're more optimistic about, who can do this fundamental re-architecting of society in a good way? I mean, where do you look in history of people who've actually done this, movements, political organizations?
Well, I point to some examples of indigenous societies that resisted colonization. I point to some, progressive era instigators. The reason we have universal education, the reason we have sanitation in cities is because of people who said what I am saying today, that there needs to be a violent agitation against people who are preventing those things. A lot of what we take for granted today that we would consider good things came out of that struggle, came out of that threat. And so I think there's a lot of positive things. Women's suffrage, they did some bombing, I believe. There was the first stirring of the labor movement, which delivered weekends and 8-hour workdays, started with burning down factories. So
this is the political violence argument, that you believe that progress is mostly achieved through political violence?
I mean, I think it has been
good progress, the progress that you're actually in favor of.
Sure. Yeah.
What would you make of somebody like Bill? I mean, I take your point on Thiel. I have to admit, I'm not a great fan of his, although I'm not sure I would want to put him in jail or take his money away from him. But what do you make of guys like Bill Gates, who, on the one hand, are obviously deeply exploitative, on the other hand, have given back much of their wealth to making the world, at least in their mind, a better place? Is the jury out on the Bill Gateses of the world, Samuel?
Friend of Epstein, by the way.
So what?
Well, so getting back to the question you asked earlier about...
Well, you can be a friend of Epstein or an associate of Epstein and not be a pedophile. I think that's...
I think they were associates after,
isn't it?
I think they were associates after he was convicted.
So are you suggesting that Gates was a pedophile?
Possibly. I don't know.
But anyway,
I would say the jury's out.
His sexual proclivities. What do you make of Gates and the way in which, and we've done shows on him with people who have been very critical, actually, of how he's used his money from trying to make the world a better place, on malaria, for example, which is complicated. I mean, do we have to credit him with some positive achievements? I mean, when it comes to progress, he certainly has a very clear idea of what he wants.
Sure. Yeah, I think, you can, if you have billions of dollars, you can put some of that into something that improves people's lives, for sure. I would also note that he's wealthier than he's ever been. So I don't think that's, diminished his wealth in any way. I would also say that just hoarding that amount of wealth prevents a lot of good that can be done. And, I think any good he has done, I think is probably quite a bit smaller than what that could have done deployed in through welfare, through, rebuilding infrastructure. And so, if we were going to do an equation, whether he has had a net positive impact, my assumption would be not, but that's something, we'd have to get the Excel sheet out, I think, to do that.
What's your take on guys like, well, I mean, I guess not guys like, what's your take on Luigi Mangioni's fame and popularity as a man who assassinated a senior healthcare executive, remains very popular when it comes to political violence? I'm not suggesting that you agree with what Mangione did, but isn't his thinking rather like yours in the sense that sometimes violence can be justified against elites, like a CEO of a big healthcare company?
Well, I think he's still, I don't think that's been proven yet that he's guilty of doing that.
You don't think he assassinated the healthcare CEO, or you think he had a right to assassinate him?
I think somebody did. I don't think that it's been proven that this particular individual did. And there were some reports that it's possible that event saved thousands of lives because the rate of refusal of care dramatically fell off after that event. And a lot of people lived who wouldn't have lived otherwise.
So that, in that sense, it can be justified. I was curious as to your thoughts also on the effective altruism movement, which are quite controversial, especially in their critique of AI and new technologies. Can one then justify assassination if indeed assassinating Mangione did save, I don't know, 100 or 1,000 lives? Is that justified?
Well, I think, at this point, we're at a stage with the climate and environmental crises that if you risk the uninhabitability of the planet, then that has to be stopped. I just I don't know what else to say. That's something that we can't continue. And so these kind of little questions about particular CEOs, I don't know. That's
well, they're not little. They're big. They may be. They're not really little questions. They're big moral questions, aren't they, about political violence and the right to assassinate, or the right, as you say, to get rid of elites, whoever they are, business and political elites.
Yeah, I don't have a list.
So I hope I'm on the list, Sammy. I wish I was. I wish I had $10 million in the bank.
Yeah, well, yeah. No, that's good. You're good. You're safe.
I'm safe for the moment. Although, as someone famously said about the French Revolution, eventually the gods will have their blood. Eventually, they will turn on you. In all seriousness, what needs to happen? We've talked about effective altruism. We've talked about taking the money away from the elites. You've suggested that we need to look back at maybe pre-industrial, some indigenous organizations and societies, but that's not very practical. What practically needs to happen? As I said, Bill McKibben is cautiously optimistic about solar power saving the world. What would you like to see done in practical terms in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, let's take that example and the idea of an energy transition to entirely solar, maybe some wind, maybe some tidal, and say we can maintain a certain level of energy supply on that. Now, in order for that to be practical, we have to limit, draw down fossil fuel use, fossil energy. I would love for that to happen. I don't know if that's practical. When we talk about the challenges to all of the things that have to happen, if we're going to maintain certain limits on the warming of the planet, there's not a lot that's practical. There's not a lot that doesn't become utopian. If we talk about keeping all of the fossil fuels in the ground, who's going to do that? Is there a government who's going to be able to do that? This is why I'm not super optimistic, because I don't think that there are practical steps to limiting warming to 2 degrees Celsius. And given my understanding of things, I think this kind of civilization that we've been talking about is going to continue using it forever, for as long as it's there, as long as they can, and is going to push us way past 5, 6, 7 degrees Celsius. If there were a practical path to total energy transition to renewables, I would be in favor of that all the way. I just don't think there is.
So to put it politely, we're fucked, Samuel.
I mean, I hope not. But it doesn't seem likely to me that the things that have to happen in order to achieve limits on warming and maintaining habitable, habitat are going to happen.
Okay, so I take your point. So let's say that I had the power, which fortunately I don't, to make Samuel Miller McDonald the ruler of the world. You can be ruler of the world. You can decide what happens. What would need to happen? What would you do to save the world?
Well, first step, main thing is that drawdown of fossil energy and stopping that as soon as you can, as fast as you can. It's still growing. We're still increasing emissions, and that needs to be, I think, the first step to anything.
So you'd shut down the oil wells, close the coal mines.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not sure people in West Virginia would be very happy with that, for better or worse.
Well, they can build some solar panels.
Is that what you would get them to do? Build some solar panels?
Potentially. I think there's a good opportunity for agroecology. This is something that I speak about in the book, that there's a strong desire when you poll people for where they want to live. The biggest group in the US wants to live rurally. And I think there's a real opportunity to create a kind of agroecological food system that employs a lot of people and, does so in a way that's.
What does that mean? Say that again, an agroecological food system. What would that mean in America? We'd all go back to the land?
No, I don't think everybody would have to go back to the land. I think it would be a larger labor market, but I think it would also potentially, if done well and done right, would mean more people would own their own land. More people would have a relationship to that land. Agroecology is very high tech. It's something that you have to have a certain level of expertise to do successfully. And there's, I think, an opportunity to train lots of people and get them back doing that kind of work that I think a lot of people want to do. I think there's a kind of epidemic of disconnection from nature and from the land that I think reversing would be a good thing. But that means dissolving some of the bigger land holdings, and it means doing it in a coordinated way. I'm not saying just come in and break everything and have a disastrous policy that Mao had that results in a famine. I'm saying doing that.
Or the Khmer Rouge or lots of other rather bloodthirsty organizations that didn't succeed in the back to the land. What about technology? Some people see technology as being our savior. There's a big abundance debate these days about whether AI can actually create more abundance. My sense is that you see AI as more dystopian than utopian. What should happen to all these new technologies, Samuel? Are they a problem with progress? Can they be used, AI or the internet or biotech, to actually enable progress? Or do we have to go back to sort of indigenous agroeconomies of one kind or another?
I think there are plenty of applications for high tech. I think it's just a matter of where you put the incentives. I wouldn't lump AI in with certain biotech. I think those are different things. I think AI has mostly been a disaster that has harmed people. I don't think it has had a net positive. And
how has it harmed people?
It's contributed to water theft. It's contributed to air pollution that has at least killed some people. It's contributed to suicides that have occurred. It's contributed to the pollution of information that is having real harm on real people and real things. It is a massive intellectual theft that has occurred, intellectual property theft. It's, I think, been put toward harmful ends like surveillance, like the production of fake videos, and you could point to, I think, a couple of things in medical applications that sometimes get put under the umbrella of AI that are perhaps positive developments, but I don't think they've saved more lives than have been harmed by data centers.
It's a really interesting debate, Samuel. As you know, it's very controversial. Everyone has very strong feelings about progress. But one of the arguments put forward by the positive camp when it comes to progress is most people's lives in the second quarter of the 21st century are better than they were 100 or 500 or 1,000 years ago. There are modern medicines. Most children survive. It's not ideal, most people don't die of starvation. People are better fed. What would you make? And I'm sure you're very familiar with these kinds of arguments. Steven Pinker, for example. Are they just wrong? Are they part of an elite conspiracy, or are they under some sort of misguided optimism? Are they just delusional?
I think it's a mix. I think some of them are delusional. I think some of them are ideologues who are putting forward propaganda that supports a particular ideology. I think, there, as I said, and as I say in the book, I think there have been positive things that have happened in the world. What I'm trying to do with this history is disentangle those positive things from this overarching grand narrative of progress, and say that we can point to discrete positive things happening, and we don't have to accept the narrative that those are part of this historical momentum.
Let's end with on a, shall we say, not an optimistic note, a utopian note, because you're a long-term thinker. This book covers a lot of ground. It's a very ambitious book. Progress, one idea built civilization and now threatens to destroy it. In 100 years' time, in 2125, what could the world look like, Samuel, if we came to our senses about technology and exploitation and inequality? Describe a better world to me, a one that could exist in 100 years' time.
Well, I think what could exist is beyond my knowledge. What I would like to see would be more examples of societies that have figured out how to not depend on, forced labor, or depend on the extraction to exhaustion of ecological systems. I don't think there's going to be, or necessarily should be, one utopia that covers the world, one system for how to govern or how to organize a culture. I think there should be many. I hope there will be many.
Well, give me the one that you like. I mean, let's be John Lennon here and imagine.
Sure. The one I like is kind of what we've been talking about, with having an agricultural system that is more ecologically integrated, having an energy system that is functional, that delivers needs and delivers on things that make life better, but doesn't produce things that do harm, and no more carbon emissions. That doesn't exist in that, except for the ones that are part of the kind of natural carbon cycle. And maybe something like sortition, some kind of really
what is this word? Can you just repeat it? You've mentioned it a couple of times.
Sure.
I'm not familiar with it. How do you spell it?
Sortition.
And what does it mean?
It means the selecting officials, government representatives from the population in a kind of lottery way, like jury selection.
Or like citizen assemblies.
Yeah.
So an arbitrary, it's a Greek idea.
That's right.
So everyone, so you think that might sort out a lot of stuff if we could go back to sortition?
I think something like that. Yeah, I have more faith in the kind of general public than in the people who seek out positions of power and control.
The elites. Well, you're a brave man, Samuel Miller McDonald. You have a very, very interesting and controversial new book. It's called Progress. One idea built civilization and now threatens to destroy it. You're brave to come on and make arguments that might seem a little pie in the sky, but probably in 100 years, you will be proved right. I hope you are. Thank you so much, and best of luck with the new book.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Sorry, I'm trying to end this. Oh.